Convoy ON 67 was a trade convoy of merchant ships during the Second World War. It was the 67th of the numbered series of ON convoys outbound from the British Isles to North America. The ships departed from Liverpool on the 14th of February 1942 with convoy rescue ship Toward, and were escorted to the mid-ocean meeting point by Escort Group B4. The Escort Group. On the 19th of February the U.S. Task Unit 4.1.5 assumed escort responsibility with Gleaves-class destroyers Us Edson and Nicholson, Wicks-class destroyers Usley and Bernadou, and the Canadian Flower-class corvette HMCS Algoma. Edson's commanding officer, Commander Albert C. Murder, USN, was the senior officer of the Escort Group. The Escort Group had never operated together before. Bernadou had been modified for long-range escort work by replacing the fourth boiler and stack with an extra fuel tank. Toward carried a high-frequency direction-finding set, and Nicholson had the only functional radar. Lee carried a British ASV aircraft radar with fixed antennae, but the coaxial cable to the antennae was repeatedly shorted by saltwater spray. Edson had no depth-charge throwers, and was limited to a linear pattern rolled off the stern. The American ships did not have enough binoculars. Bernadou had a 7x50 pair for the officer of the deck and a 6x30 pair for the junior officer of the deck, but there were none for the lookouts. U-155 found and reported the convoy on the 21st of February. Toward obtained a bearing on the contact report, and Lee searched the bearing unsuccessfully at dusk. U-155 approached the port quarter of the convoy in the pre-dawn hours of the 22nd of February and torpedoed the British tanker Adele and a Norwegian freighter Sama. Both ships sank quickly. Algoma rescued 11 of Adele's crew of 31 while Nicholson and Toward found 20 survivors from Sama's crew of 50. U-155 crash-dived to avoid Bernadou, but the destroyer never saw the U-boat. U-155 made another emergency dive while shadowing the convoy at 1042 hours, but Edson did not detect the U-boat. U-587, U-69 and U-558 found the convoy on the 23rd of February. U-558 approached the convoy at 2120, but repeatedly turned away to avoid Bernadou's patrols until a squall provided cover at midnight. U-558 torpedoed the Norwegian tanker Inverreder at 0045 hours on the 24th of February. The tanker sank slowly and Toward rescued all 42 of the crew. U-558 approached again at 0230 hours and fired a single torpedo at Edson. The torpedo missed, and Edson was unaware it had been fired at. U-558 torpedoed the Norwegian tanker Ardanger at 0255 hours. U-558 reloaded and at 0550 hours torpedoed the British tankers Anadara and Finanga, and a British freighter White Crest. All three ships straggled and were sunk. Later that morning, the convoy commodore sent a signal to the escort commander regarding the performance of U-558. "That chap must be one of the best ones. I'd hope you have done him in." U-158 found the convoy at 0425 hours on the 24th of February and torpedoed the British tanker Empire Celt. Empire Celt was using the Admiralty net defense system, streaming a strong steel net from 50-foot booms along either side of the ship. One torpedo broke through the net and hit amidships. Empire Celt later broke in half, but a tug from Newfoundland rescued 31 from the crew of 37. As U-558 was torpedoing ships on the starboard side of the convoy, U-158 approached the port side and torpedoed British tanker Deloma at 0635 hours. Deloma was the only one of the torpedoed ships to successfully reach Halifax. Both U-158 and U-558 dived to avoid being seen in the early daylight. U-558 found and sank the I Danger, drifting and abandoned astern of the convoy, with gunfire in a torpedo. All of I Danger's crew had been rescued. Lee investigated a DF bearing from toward at 15:15 and spotted U-558 20 miles astern of the convoy at 1707 hours. Lee dropped 8 depth charges at 1746 hours, and then surprised the U-boat on the surface at 1813 and dropped 14 depth charges at 1847 hours. U-558 was undamaged. Nicholson investigated a DF bearing from toward and sighted U-158 at 1323. U-158 dived and evaded Nicholson. Nicholson then slowed to Listlin. U-158 surfaced at 1550 hours and was surprised to find Nicholson waiting 1,600 yards away. U-158 crash-dived before Nicholson saw the U-boat. U-158 surfaced again at 1817 and was surprised to find Edson 2,000 yards away. U-158 again avoided detection by crash diving. Edson finally spotted U-158 making another convoy approach at 2008 hours and dropped 25 depth charges over the following 6 hours. U-158 was undamaged but had been prevented from making further attacks on the convoy. Admiral Karl Donitz, the BDU commander-in-chief of U-boats, ordered his U-boats to discontinue the attack on the 25th of February. The escort was reinforced on the 26th of February by the Treasury-class cutter USCGC Spencer. The remainder of the convoy reached Halifax on 1 March 1942. Ships in convoy.